What if the secrets of Mammoth Cave aren't just underground, but hidden in plain sight? We're taking you to an abandoned ranger station, a place forgotten by time, where every creak and shadow whispers stories of an unseen past. Prepare to uncover the mysteries of this iconic national park like never before. But before we dive into tonight's terrifying tale, help us reach 1,000 subscribers by New Year. We're posting daily horror content, and your subscription keeps these stories coming. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. You won't want to miss what we've uncovered. Now, let me tell you about Mammoth Cave National Park. Deep in the heart of Kentucky lies the world's longest cave system, over 400 miles of explored passages, with an estimated 600 miles still waiting in the darkness. But some discoveries should remain buried. Some passages should never be explored, and some voices calling from the depths should never, ever be answered. This is the story of Eli Patterson and the day he learned that the dead don't always rest in peace. The flowers appeared on a Thursday. Eli Patterson noticed them during his morning walk past the old guide cemetery, fresh white lilies at the base of Stephen Bishop's grave, petals still holding dew. He stopped, checked his watch. 6:45. The park didn't open until 8, and the visitor log from yesterday showed no one on the heritage trail after 3 in the afternoon. He knelt beside the flowers, touched a petal. Cold, wet, real. The inscription on the headstone read, Stephen Bishop, first guide and explorer of the Mammoth Cave. Eli had read it 100 times, had led tours past this grave and told Bishop's story to thousands of visitors. An enslaved man brought to the cave in 1838 at 17 years old, the first to cross the bottomless pit, the first to discover Echo River. A genius explorer who died in 1857 at 37, cause unknown, buried here in the woods he'd made famous. But someone had been here. Someone who knew enough to leave flowers, who cared enough to come in darkness. Eli pulled out his phone to photograph the scene. The camera app opened, focused, then flickered. The screen showed streaks of light across the image, bright lines that hadn't been visible to his eye. He lowered the phone, looked at the grave again. Nothing unusual. Raised the phone. The streaks returned, radiating from the headstone like it was leaking something the camera could see, but his eyes couldn't. Behind him, gravel crunched. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming up the trail from the direction of the cave entrance. Hello? Eli turned, hand moving to his radio. Park service. Identify yourself. The footsteps stopped. The woods went silent. No birds, no wind. Even the usual morning sounds of the forest, the chittering of squirrels, the rustle of leaves, all of it ceased as if someone had pressed a mute button on the world. Then a voice spoke, clear as if the person stood right beside him. Who sent you? Eli spun, searching the tree line. Sir, you need to show yourself. The park isn't open yet. No response, but the footsteps resumed, circling the cemetery fence. He could hear them perfectly. Boot heels on gravel, the slight scuff of leather on stone, but he couldn't see anyone making them. His radio crackled. He grabbed it, keyed the mic. Station, this is Patterson. I'm at the Heritage Trail Cemetery. Possible trespasser, but I can't get a visual. Static poured from the speaker, thick and loud. Through it, barely audible, Chief Ranger Victoria Hayes' voice. Patterson, can't, reception. The radio went dead. Eli looked down. Fresh boot prints in the mud beside Bishop's grave. Large prints made by old-fashioned boots, the kind you'd see in a museum display about 19th century cave exploration. They led away from the headstone, moving across the cemetery in a path that matched exactly with the footsteps he'd heard. The prints walked straight toward a limestone outcropping at the cemetery's edge, and stopped. Not at the base of the rock, not around it. They ended as if the person making them had walked through solid stone. Cold air breathed out from the rock face. Eli felt it on his skin, smelled the distinctive mineral scent of cave air, limestone and water and ancient darkness. From somewhere deep below the earth, so faint he almost missed it, came the sound of someone laughing. Sad, hollow, lost. Eli backed away from the cemetery, his heart hammering. He was 29 years old, had 4 years of experience at Mammoth Cave, and prided himself on his rational, scientific approach to his work. He didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in curses or hauntings or any of the supernatural nonsense tourists sometimes whispered about. But he'd heard that voice, seen those prints, felt that unnatural cold rising from stone. He turned and walked quickly back toward the ranger station, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The cemetery sat empty and peaceful in the growing morning light. But the flowers remained at Bishop's grave, white and perfect and impossible. Victoria Hayes was waiting in her office when Eli arrived. She sat behind her desk, hands folded, silver hair pulled back in her usual severe bun. She looked tired, Eli thought, more tired than he'd ever seen her in the 3 years since she'd become chief ranger. "Close the door," she said. He did. "You went to the cemetery this morning." "How did you know?" "Because that's where everyone goes when they first start noticing." Victoria pulled a file from her desk drawer, slid it across to him. "How many years have you been here, Patterson?" 4. "Then you're right on schedule." She tapped the file. "Read it, then we'll talk." The file was labelled Heritage Trail Incidents 1972 to 1978. Inside, Eli found incident reports from 6 different rangers, all describing similar experiences near the old guide's cemetery. Voices asking, "Who sent you?" Footsteps with no source, equipment malfunctions, and dreams, vivid, recurring dreams of cave exploration, of passages that didn't exist on any map, of darkness that felt alive. One ranger, Dennis Walsh, had filed increasingly desperate reports. June 1972. Heard unidentified voice near Bishop Grave, August 1972. Voice continues. Sounds educated, almost musical. Asks the same question. October 1972. Dreams every night now. I'm in the cave, but it's different, deeper. The passages move when I'm not looking at them. The final report from Walsh was dated November 1972. It knows my name. It knows my wife's name. It knows things it shouldn't know. I'm going into the cave tomorrow with recording equipment. I'm going to prove this is real. There were no more reports from Dennis Walsh after that date. A handwritten note on the file, signed by the chief ranger at the time, read, "Ranger Walsh submitted resignation effective November 15th, 1972. Relocated out of state. No forwarding address." But 3 years later, another ranger filed a report. Margaret Walsh, the wife. "My husband didn't resign," she wrote. "He went into the cave on November 14th and never came out. The Park Service claims he left his uniform and badge in his locker with a resignation letter. But that's not his handwriting. I've shown it to experts. That's not his handwriting. My husband is still in that cave, and I'm going to find him." The next report, dated 1 week later, was from a different ranger. Margaret Walsh failed to report for duty. Vehicle found in parking lot. Personal effects in order. No sign of struggle. Assuming she followed her husband's example and resigned without notice. The reports continued through 1978. Different rangers, same experiences, same pattern of escalation, same endings. Resignation, relocation, disappearance. Then nothing. The incident stopped being documented. "Why did the reports end?" Eli asked. "They didn't end. They went off the books." Victoria stood, walked to her window. Outside, the Kentucky hills rolled away in shades of green and gold, beautiful and peaceful. The Park Service decided some things are better handled quietly. Every ranger who gets assigned here eventually notices the anomalies. Most ignore them, finish their contracts, transfer out. Some, like you, start investigating. And what happens to those rangers? Victoria didn't answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Some learn to live with it, to manage it, to stand between the cave and the people who might get too close. And the others? The others answer when they are called. Eli felt cold again, that same unnatural chill from the cemetery. What's calling them? The cave itself, or something in it, or something that's become part of it over millions of years. Victoria turned to face him. "I don't pretend to understand what it is, but I know what it does. It remembers. Every person who's died in those passages, everyone who's suffered there, everyone who's loved exploring the darkness. The cave holds onto them, absorbs them, keeps them. You're talking about ghosts. I'm talking about memory made solid, consciousness trapped in limestone, time folding in on itself in the absolute dark. Victoria's eyes were hard. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night, Patterson. But I've been chief ranger here for 15 years, and I've watched 7 people disappear into that cave. Official story is always the same. Resignation, relocation, personal reasons. Truth is, they're still down there. Still guiding tours for visitors who'll never see them. Still exploring passages that lead nowhere and everywhere. Eli's mouth had gone dry. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to see things, hear things, feel things pulling at you. And when that happens, you'll have a choice. Transfer out and spend the rest of your life wondering if you're crazy, or stay and help me keep others safe for as long as you can stand it. That's not much of a choice. No, Victoria agreed. It's not, but it's the only one we have. Eli led the 6 o'clock tour that evening. 20 tourists, excited to see the cave by lantern light, the way visitors had experienced it in the 1800s. He guided them through the rotunda, the massive chamber just inside the entrance where saltpeter miners had once worked. He showed them Gothic Avenue, pointed out Stephen Bishop's signature on the ceiling, written in mirror image, a small act of rebellion and brilliance from a man who'd been considered property. Bishop was 17 when he was brought here, Eli told the group, holding his lantern high. Enslaved, forced to work as a cave guide. But he became more than that. He became one of the greatest explorers in American history. He discovered passages we're still exploring today. He mapped the cave from memory, drawing accurate charts that remained in use for 40 years. He had a gift for understanding the darkness. A woman near the back raised her hand. Did he ever get his freedom? Yes, in 1856. His owner's will stated he'd be freed 7 years after the owner's death. Bishop got his freedom papers and planned to move to Liberia with his wife Charlotte to start a new life. Did he go? Eli paused. He'd told this story 100 times, but tonight the words caught in his throat. No, he died a year later, in 1857. He was 37. The cause of death was never recorded. They moved deeper, the bottomless pit, where Bishop had famously laid a ladder across the void to reach the other side. Echo River, the underground waterway where blind fish drifted in eternal night. The tourists gasped appropriately, asked questions, took photos with flash-disabled cameras. But Eli kept noticing things. Ripples in Echo River when the air was perfectly still. Shadows that moved wrong that seemed to walk independently of the tourists casting them. And sounds, whispers just below the threshold of hearing, like a conversation in the next room that stopped whenever he tried to focus on it. Near the water's edge, a child tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mum, why is that man standing in the river?" The mother laughed. "There's no one there, sweetie." "Yes, there is. He's wearing old clothes. He's holding a lamp like ours." 3 other tourists turned to look where the child pointed. One, a college-age man with glasses, gasped. "I see him too. Holy shit, I see him." Eli looked. At first, nothing. Then, a suggestion of form. A silhouette that his eyes couldn't quite focus on, like trying to stare directly at a blind spot. Tall, athletic, confident posture, holding something that cast light but produced no smoke. The figure raised its free hand, waved, then turned and walked away into a passage that wasn't part of the tour route, a narrow tunnel that led deeper into restricted areas. "Everyone back to the rotunda," Eli said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "Tour's over. Follow me. Stay together." "But we haven't seen..." "Now. We're leaving now." The authority in his voice killed the protests. The tourists followed him back through the passages, their lanterns creating a river of light through the darkness. But Eli kept glancing back, kept seeing movement at the edge of the lantern glow. Figures standing inside passages, watching, waiting. At the entrance, as the tourists filed out into the parking lot, the college student who'd seen the figure grabbed Eli's arm. "That was real, wasn't it? That person in the water?" "It was a trick of the light." "Bullshit. I saw him. I saw his face. He looked like the pictures you showed us, of Stephen Bishop." "That was him." Eli pulled his arm free. The mind plays tricks in the dark. It's a well-documented phenomenon. Your brain fills in details based on what you expect to see. I know what I saw. Then I'd recommend not coming back. Eli met the young man's eyes. Some people see things in Mammoth Cave. Most of them ignore it, enjoy their visit, go home with a fun story. But some people become obsessed. They come back again and again, trying to see more, to understand what they witnessed. Those people are making a mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind where you don't go home at all. The young man stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly and walked away. Eli stood in the parking lot as the tourists dispersed, their headlights sweeping across the trees as they drove toward the exit. When the last car disappeared, he turned back to look at the cave entrance. A figure stood just inside, tall, athletic, holding a lantern that produced no smoke. Stephen Bishop smiled at him, then the darkness swallowed him whole. Eli went back into the cave at midnight. He knew it was stupid, knew he was violating every safety protocol in the book, but he needed to understand, needed to see with his own eyes what Victoria had been talking about, what the reports had documented, what the tourists had glimpsed. He descended alone, his headlamp cutting through blackness so complete it felt physical. The temperature dropped as he went deeper, his breath forming clouds. His footsteps echoed strangely, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. At Echo River, he stopped. The water lay black and still, reflecting his light like a mirror. "Stephen Bishop," he called out. His voice bounced off stone, came back distorted. "I know you're here. I know you've been trying to communicate. I'm listening." Silence. Just the sound of water dripping somewhere distant, the slow, patient sound of limestone forming drop by drop over millions of years. "My name is Eli Patterson. I'm a ranger here. I want to understand what happened to you." More silence. Then from the darkness ahead, that voice he'd heard at the cemetery. "No, you don't." Eli spun, his headlamp beam sweeping across the passage, empty. But the voice had been close, intimate, like someone whispering directly into his ear. "I do. I'm not afraid." Laughter, sad and knowing. "Yes, you are. You should be." "Show yourself. You're not ready to see." "I'm ready." A pause, then, "Very well." The figure materialized 10 feet in front of him. Not gradually, it was simply absent one moment and present the next, as if it had always been there, and Eli's perception had just caught up. Stephen Bishop stood in the passage looking exactly as he did in the single known photograph from the 1850s. Athletic build, intelligent eyes. The bearing of someone who knew his worth regardless of what the law said he was. But his eyes caught and reflected Eli's headlamp like an animal's. Silver white. Impossible. "I died here," Bishop said. "June 1857. The date on my grave is wrong. Another lie among many." He moved closer, and Eli noticed he cast no shadow. "I'd been free for exactly 1 year and 8 days, 13 months of freedom after 19 years of slavery. Do you know what I did with that freedom?" Eli shook his head, unable to speak. "I explored. Charlotte and we planned to move to Liberia, start fresh where my skin wouldn't define my existence. But I couldn't leave the cave. Every day I stayed away. I felt it calling, pulling. I'd wake up in the night with cave mud on my feet, no memory of walking there. I'd find myself standing at the entrance, staring into the dark. With hours gone by I couldn't account for. Bishop's form flickered, became less solid for a moment. So I came back, just once more, I told myself. Just to explore one more passage, make one more discovery, see one more chamber I'd missed during my years of servitude. Just once, as a free man. Just once for myself. What happened? I found something. Bishop gestured deeper into the cave. A passage beyond Echo River. Beyond the bottomless pit. Deeper than I'd ever gone. And at the end of that passage, a chamber. With drawings on the walls. Old drawings. Ancient. They showed people descending into caves. And they showed what those people became when they came back out. What did they become? Part of the darkness, part of the stone, part of the cave itself. Bishop's eyes dimmed, became almost human for a moment. The cave doesn't just remember, Eli. It consumes. Every thought, every memory, every moment of joy or suffering or discovery, it absorbs all of it. And everyone who dies here, everyone who loves exploring the passages, everyone who feels the calling, we don't die. We change. We become extensions of the cave's consciousness. We become its memory, its voice, its hands reaching out into the world above. That's impossible. You're talking to a dead man. Impossible is relative. Eli's legs felt weak. He leaned against the passage wall, felt the cold stone through his uniform shirt. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to feel the calling soon. Maybe you already do. And when it gets strong enough, when you can't resist anymore, I want you to understand what you're choosing. Bishop moved closer still, until Eli could have reached out and touched him if he'd dared. We're not suffering. We're not trapped against our will, not exactly. But we're not free either. We exist in the spaces between. We guide tours that only we can see. We explore passages that only we can reach. We sing songs that only we can hear. Forever, Eli, forever in the dark. I won't answer. I'll leave, transfer out. You can try. Some people manage it. They leave Mammoth Cave, move across the country, start new lives, but they never stop hearing us. Never stop dreaming about the passages. Never stop feeling the pull. Bishop's form began to fade, and eventually most of them come back, because the calling doesn't weaken with distance. It only grows stronger with time. Wait, don't go. I have questions. You'll have all the time in the world for questions. Bishop was barely visible now, just a shimmer in the darkness. When you join us, and you will join us, Eli, I can already see it in you. The curiosity, the love of history, the need to understand. You're one of us. You always have been. Then he was gone, and Eli stood alone in the passage with only his dying headlamp and the sound of his own ragged breathing. He ran, fled back through the passages, his light swinging wildly, shadows dancing on the walls like living things. Behind him, he heard footsteps, dozens of them, hundreds, an army of the lost following him through the dark. He burst out of the cave entrance at 2 a.m, gasping, falling to his knees on the asphalt parking lot. His headlamp flickered once more and died. In the darkness, all around him, he heard singing, old spirituals, work songs, the music of enslaved people who'd laboured in these passages nearly 2 centuries ago, their voices preserved in limestone, echoing forever in the absolute dark. Victoria was already in her office when Eli arrived the next morning. She looked at his mud-stained uniform, his bloodshot eyes, his shaking hands, and simply nodded. You went back. I had to see. And now you've seen. So what are you going to do? Eli slumped into the chair across from her desk. I don't know. Part of me wants to run, transfer to Yellowstone or Yosemite or somewhere without caves, somewhere with open sky and endless light. And the other part? The other part wants to go back, wants to see that chamber Bishop talked about, wants to understand what's really down there. He looked up at her. How do you stand it? 15 years of knowing this, feeling it, resisting it. Victoria's smile was tired and sad. Some days I stand it better than others. Some days I wake up and have to physically stop myself from walking into the cave and never coming back out. But I have a job. Keep tourists safe. Keep rangers from getting too curious. Stand between the cave and the people who might answer too quickly. How many people have you watched disappear? 7 in 15 years. 7 people who couldn't resist the calling, who went into the cave one day and never came back out. Officially, they all resigned or transferred or moved away for personal reasons. Officially, they're all alive and well somewhere else. Victoria's hands tightened on her desk. But I've been into the restricted passages. I've seen their signatures on the walls, dated from after their supposed resignations. I've heard their voices singing in the darkness. They're still here, Eli. All of them. Still guiding. Still exploring. Still calling. Who was the most recent? Victoria didn't answer for a long moment. When she did, her voice was barely audible. My predecessor, Chief Ranger William Henderson. He's the one who stopped filing official incident reports in 1978. He thought if we just ignored it, managed it quietly, it would eventually stop. 15 years he fought it. Then one night in 1993, he told his wife he was going to do a final inventory of the cave system. Said he'd be back by morning. She pulled out a photograph from her desk drawer, slid it across to Eli. This was taken 2 years ago, unauthorized night exploration by some teenagers who snuck into restricted areas. The photograph showed a cave passage, lit by camera flash, and standing in the background, barely visible, a figure in an old Park Service uniform. Eli recognized the face from archive personnel files. William Henderson, 30 years dead, still wearing his ranger badge, still on duty in the eternal dark. Does his wife know? She died in 2010. Cancer. Right before she passed, she told her daughter that she'd been hearing William's voice for years, calling to her from the cave entrance, asking her to join him. She never went. She fought it until the cancer killed her, and even then she made her daughter promise to cremate her, scatter her ashes in the ocean, make sure nothing of her ended up anywhere near Mammoth Cave. Victoria took the photograph back, returned it to her drawer. I think about her sometimes, about how much strength it takes to resist someone you love calling you home, even when home is somewhere you can never leave. Eli felt something shift in his chest, a weight settling there that he knew would never fully lift. What do you need me to do? Stay. Help me watch. When tourists start showing too much interest in the wrong areas, redirect them. When rangers start hearing voices, document it, monitor them, intervene if necessary, and most importantly, resist the calling yourself for as long as you possibly can. Because every day you hold out is another day someone else doesn't have to take over this job. And when I can't hold out anymore? Victoria met his eyes, and in her gaze Eli saw 15 years of exhaustion, of constant vigilance, of slowly losing ground to something vast and patient and inevitable. Then I'll watch you go into the cave one last time. I'll file the resignation paperwork. I'll tell everyone you moved away for personal reasons. And I'll wait for the next person who starts noticing the flowers at Stephen Bishop's grave. Because there's always a next person. The cave makes sure of that. 6 months passed. Eli learned to recognize the signs. Tourists who lingered too long at Echo River, staring into the water as if seeing something beneath the surface. Rangers who started talking about strange dreams, about finding cave mud in their apartments, about hearing their names called from the passages. Visitors who came back week after week, always booking the same tours, always asking about the restricted areas, always mentioning Stephen Bishop with a particular reverence in their voices. He documented everything, built a database of incidents cross-referenced with disappearances, created a system for flagging high-risk individuals. He worked with Victoria to quietly redirect the most vulnerable, suggesting they visit other parks, offering them tours of surface trails instead of underground passages, finding gentle ways to break their fascination before it became obsession. They saved some people, but not all. In March, a college student named Amanda Chen started showing the warning signs. She'd visited Mammoth Cave during a history class field trip the previous fall, had become captivated by the stories of the enslaved guides. She'd written her senior thesis on Stephen Bishop, had applied to the Park Service specifically to work at Mammoth Cave, had requested assignment here with an enthusiasm that set off every alarm bell in Eli's mind. He tried to redirect her, suggested she'd be happier at other parks, places where she could focus on above-ground historical interpretation. But Amanda had already felt the calling, and once you felt it, reason became meaningless. She lasted 3 months. Eli found her uniform folded neatly on her bed on a Wednesday morning, her ranger badge placed on top, her apartment door left unlocked. On her bathroom mirror, written in what looked like cave mud, were the words, "Finally home." He went into the cave that night, searching the restricted passages even though he knew what he'd find. Deep beyond Echo River, in a chamber that didn't appear on any official map, he found her signature carved into limestone. Amanda Chen, 2026, free at last. Below it in different handwriting, a message from Bishop. She's with us now, she's safe, she understands, and Eli, you will too, soon. The dream started that night. Every time Eli closed his eyes, he found himself in the cave. Not the tourist routes he knew by heart, but new passages, deeper chambers, areas that shouldn't exist. In the dreams, he explored with a joy he'd never felt while awake, discovering wonders beyond description. And in the dreams, he was never alone. Bishop walked beside him, and Amanda and his grandfather, who Eli now understood had answered the calling decades ago, who'd never actually died of cancer in 2015, but had simply gone home to the darkness where he'd always belonged. The dreams felt more real than waking. Eli would wake exhausted, as if he'd actually spent the night exploring. He'd find cave mud on his floor, limestone dust under his fingernails, the smell of underground water in his hair. He started avoiding sleep, drank coffee until his hands shook, stayed awake for dangerous stretches, anything to keep from dreaming. But eventually, exhaustion won, and when it did, the cave was waiting. In May, Victoria stopped coming to work. Her assistant said she'd taken emergency leave, family emergency, no estimated return date. But Eli went to her house and found it empty. Not cleaned out, she'd left all her possessions, her photos, her books. But Victoria herself was gone, and Eli knew he wouldn't find her in Oregon or Florida or anywhere else the official story might claim she'd relocated to. He went to her office, found her ranger badge on the desk, found a note underneath. "I'm sorry, I lasted as long as I could. 15 years, Eli. That's longer than most. Maybe you'll do better, but probably not. It's so beautiful down there. So peaceful. Why did I fight it so long? You'll understand when you stop fighting too." The park superintendent appeared that afternoon, asked Eli if he'd be willing to serve as interim chief ranger while they searched for Victoria's replacement. The pay would be better. The authority would be greater, and it would give him the access he needed to continue the work Victoria had started, protecting people from the cave's hunger. Eli said yes, even though he knew what it really meant. The cave wanted him in charge, wanted him to have authority over the passages, over the tours, over the other rangers, wanted him positioned perfectly to continue calling others down into the darkness. He was being promoted into the same trap that had caught Victoria, and she'd known it. They'd both known it. But what choice did he have? Transfer out, and some unsuspecting ranger would take the position, would have no idea what they were facing until it was too late. Stay, and at least he could protect people for a while longer, even as the calling grew stronger in his own mind. Some traps you walked into with your eyes open because the alternative was worse. Summer brought tourists by the thousands, families with excited children, geology students with expensive equipment, history buffs with dog-eared books about Stephen Bishop and Floyd Collins and the Kentucky Cave Wars. Eli led tours, gave interviews, posed for photographs with visitors thrilled to meet the new chief ranger. And every night, he dreamed of the passages. The cave showed him things in those dreams. Chambers filled with crystals that sang when you breathed on them. Underground rivers that flowed upward, defying gravity. Passages where time moved differently, where you could walk for hours and emerge to find only minutes had passed above. It showed him the others too, all the people who'd answered the calling over the decades, over the centuries. They weren't suffering, weren't screaming or trapped or desperate. They moved through the passages with purpose and joy, forever exploring, forever discovering, forever guiding invisible tourists through darkness that welcomed them like returning family. Bishop was always there in the dreams, smiling, patient, waiting. "You're close now," he said one night as they stood in a chamber Eli had never seen while awake. "I can feel how thin the barrier's becoming, how much easier it is for you to be here than there. Soon you won't be able to tell the difference. Soon the dream will feel more real than waking, and when that happens, when you can't remember why you're resisting, you'll take the final step." What's the final step? You just walk deeper. Follow a passage that calls to you, and keep walking until you realize you're not dreaming anymore, that you've been awake all along, that this is where you're supposed to be. Bishop reached out, and even in the dream, Eli felt the cold touch of his hand. "Your grandfather is here. He wants to see you. He's been waiting so long." "My grandfather died in a hospital in Louisville?" "No, He came home to Mammoth Cave one last time before the cancer could kill him, came down into the passages and kept walking until he found us. He's been here for 10 years, Eli, guiding tours, exploring new chambers, singing the old songs he learned as a boy. He's happy, happier than he ever was in the world above, and he wants you to be happy too. Eli woke up crying, though he couldn't say if it was from sorrow or longing. September brought Amanda's parents to the park. They'd received the official story. Their daughter had resigned her position and moved away without leaving a forwarding address, apparently seeking a fresh start after completing her education. But they didn't believe it. Amanda had called them every Sunday since starting college. She sent postcards. She video chatted. She wouldn't disappear without a word. Eli met with them in his office, prepared with the lies he'd been taught to tell. But when he looked at Amanda's mother, saw the desperate hope in her eyes, the way she clutched her daughter's favourite sweater like a talisman, the words died in his throat. "She's gone," he said instead. "I'm sorry. She's gone, and she's not coming back, and there's nothing you can do." "What do you mean, gone? Did something happen to her? Was there an accident?" "Not an accident. A choice. But not a choice anyone makes in their right mind." Eli pulled out his documentation, the database he'd been building, the incident reports going back decades. "Your daughter heard something calling her from the cave, an acoustic phenomenon we don't fully understand. It affects certain people with specific psychological profiles, history enthusiasts, people who love exploring, people who feel disconnected from the surface world. It calls to them, and eventually some of them answer." Amanda's father leaned forward. "You're saying the cave, what, hypnotized her? Made her disappear?" "I'm saying something in that cave has been calling people for over 200 years. I'm saying the Park Service has been documenting disappearances linked to this phenomenon since at least the 1970s, probably longer. I'm saying your daughter is the 7th person I personally know of who's vanished while working here, and there are probably hundreds more if you go back far enough through the records. Then why hasn't anyone done anything? Why hasn't this been investigated, shut down, stopped?" Eli met their eyes. "Because we can't stop it. We don't even fully understand what it is. And every time someone tries to seriously investigate, tries to close off passages or restrict access or expose what's happening, they end up disappearing too. The cave protects itself. The cave takes care of its own." Amanda's mother started crying. Her husband put his arm around her, but his face had gone pale. "You're saying our daughter is dead. I'm saying she's in the cave. I'm saying she's never coming out. I'm saying that in some way, I don't fully comprehend. She's part of the cave now, part of its memory, part of whatever consciousness exists in that darkness." Eli pulled out the photograph from the restricted passage, showed them Amanda's signature on the wall. "I took this 2 weeks ago. That's her handwriting. That's dated 2 months after her supposed resignation. She's down there, Mr. and Mrs. Chen. She's still there." They left his office in shock, promising to contact authorities, to expose this horror, to make sure no other family suffered what they were suffering. Eli knew they wouldn't succeed. The Park Service had too much practice covering this up, too many decades of plausible deniability, too much institutional inertia. The Chens would file reports that would be politely received and quietly buried. They'd hire private investigators who'd find nothing concrete. They'd eventually exhaust themselves against the bureaucratic wall and be left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. But at least he'd told them the truth. At least someone outside the park knew the reality of what happened here. That night, Bishop appeared in his office. Not in a dream. Eli was awake, finishing paperwork, when he looked up and saw the ghost standing in the corner. "That was cruel," Bishop said, "giving them hope, making them think they can save her. They deserve the truth. The truth is that Amanda is happy now. She's free from the limitations of flesh and time. She explores without exhaustion, discovers without fear, guides without obligation. What you told her parents is that she's trapped, that she's suffering, that she needs rescue." Bishop moved closer, his form more solid than Eli had ever seen it. "You're projecting your own fear onto her situation, your own resistance onto her transformation. But she didn't resist, Eli. She walked into the darkness willingly, joyfully, with full knowledge of what she was choosing. She was 23 years old. She didn't know what she was choosing. She knew better than you do. She'd been hearing the calling for months before she answered. She'd done the research, read the historical accounts, understood the pattern, and she chose to join us anyway because she recognized the gift being offered. Bishop's eyes glowed in the dim office light. You're the last holdout now, Eli. The last ranger here who knows the truth and hasn't accepted it. Everyone else who understood has either left or joined us. You're alone in your resistance. Doesn't that tell you something? It tells me I'm the only one left to protect people from you. Or it tells you that you're fighting a battle that can't be won, resisting a transformation that's inevitable, postponing a reunion that's meant to be. Bishop turned toward the window, looked out at the darkness where the cave entrance lay hidden in the trees. Your grandfather asks about you. Every day. He wonders why you're taking so long, why you're suffering in the light when you could be joyful in the dark. He misses you, Eli. We all do. We're waiting for you to come home. Then he was gone, and Eli was alone in his office with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the weight of impossible responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. October marked 1 year since Eli had first seen the flowers at Stephen Bishop's grave. He went to the cemetery on the anniversary, found fresh white lilies waiting there, as they'd been waiting every morning for 12 months. He knelt beside the grave, touched the cold stone of the marker. I don't know how much longer I can fight this, he said aloud, not caring if anyone heard. I dream about the cave every night. I hear voices calling my name from every dark corner. I find myself standing at the entrance with no memory of walking there. It's getting harder to remember why I'm resisting, harder to remember why I shouldn't just give in, just go deeper, just join everyone who's waiting for me down there. The stone was silent, but the air grew cold, and Eli felt a presence beside him. Not threatening, just there, listening. Amanda's parents think I'm insane. The park superintendent is concerned about my mental health. The other rangers avoid me because I ask too many questions about sounds they've heard, dreams they've had, the pull they feel toward the restricted passages. Eli laughed, bitter and tired. I'm becoming the crazy person, the paranoid conspiracy theorist, the ranger who sees ghosts and hears voices and believes a cave can think. But you know it can, Bishop's voice came from the air beside him. You've felt it. You've seen us. You've heard the calling. You know everything you've been told is true. Knowing it's true doesn't make it easier to accept. No, but it makes it inevitable. Bishop materialized, sitting on his own grave, as if it were nothing more than a park bench. I fought it for a year after my freedom. 1 year of trying to build a life in the light, trying to forget the darkness, trying to be something other than what I'd always been. But the cave was patient. It waited, it called, and eventually I stopped fighting and came home. Is it really home, or is it a prison you've convinced yourself to love? Can't it be both? Bishop smiled. I was enslaved for 19 years in this world, owned, forced to work for another man's profit, beaten if I disobeyed, forbidden from learning to read even though I was smarter than most of my masters. That was a prison, Eli. The cave? The cave is freedom. Freedom to explore without boundaries. Freedom to discover without asking permission. Freedom to exist without someone claiming to own my body, my labor, my very soul. But you can never leave. Why would I want to? Everything I loved about life is here. The exploration, the discovery, the joy of showing others the wonders hidden in darkness. I guide tours every day. Not your tourists, but our own visitors, the ones who cross over, the ones who join us. I show them passages that don't exist in your world. I teach them to see without light, to navigate by feeling the air currents, to understand the language the cave speaks in dripping water and settling stone. Bishop's enthusiasm was genuine, infectious. I'm more alive now than I ever was when my heart was beating. You're dead, Stephen. You died in 1857. What you are now is just the cave wearing your memory like a mask. And what are you? a collection of atoms arranged in a pattern that maintains itself through constant consumption and excretion, a temporary structure that will dissolve back into component elements within a century. The only difference between us is that my pattern is maintained by limestone and darkness instead of carbon and water. I'm no less real than you are, Eli, just differently embodied." Eli had no answer to that. He stood, brushed dirt from his uniform, looked back at the cave entrance visible through the trees. "How much longer do I have?" "There's no way to know, but I'd guess weeks, maybe days. You're dreaming more often than you're waking now. You're spending more time in the passages than in your office. Soon the boundary will dissolve completely, and you'll realize you've been one of us all along, that you've been fighting a reality that's already happened, that all of this has been nothing but one last dream before you wake up in the darkness where you belong." Bishop stood, his form flickering in the afternoon light. "When you're ready, your grandfather and I will be waiting at Echo River. Amanda too. She wants to show you the chamber she discovered last week, a formation like nothing any of us have seen before. She's so excited to share it with you." Then he faded, and Eli stood alone in the cemetery with the flowers and the impossible truth. The new ranger arrived on a Monday. Her name was Jordan Pierce, 26 years old, recently graduated with a degree in geology and a specialization in karst topography. She'd applied to Mammoth Cave specifically, had written her thesis on the formation of the cave system, had dreams of conducting groundbreaking research on the unexplored passages. Eli saw the signs immediately. The way she stared at the cave entrance a little too long, the reverence in her voice when she talked about the enslaved guides, the light in her eyes when he mentioned there were still hundreds of miles of unmapped passages waiting to be discovered. She was exactly the kind of person the cave wanted. He pulled her aside on her second day. "Jordan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. This park isn't safe, not in the way you think. There's something in the cave system. I don't know what to call it, consciousness or memory or hunger, but it calls to certain people. People like you, people who love exploring, who feel drawn to the darkness, who dream about making discoveries, and when it calls loud enough, those people disappear." Jordan laughed, uncomfortable. "Is this some kind of hazing ritual for new rangers?" "I wish it was. I've watched 7 people vanish into that cave in the past year. 7 people who heard the calling and couldn't resist. Their official files say they resigned, relocated, moved on with their lives, but I've seen their signatures in restricted passages dated after their supposed departures. I've heard their voices singing in the darkness. They're still here, Jordan. They're still in the cave. And if you're not careful, you'll join them." Her smile faded. "You're serious?" "Completely. And I'm telling you this now, on your second day, before you get too attached to this place, before you start hearing the voices, before the dreams begin. Transfer out, request reassignment, go to Carlsbad or Wind Cave or any other cave system in the Park Service. Just don't stay here, please." Jordan studied his face for a long moment. "Have you heard it? The calling?" "Every day, every night. It's getting harder to resist. I probably don't have much time left before I answer it myself. But you're still here, still warning me, still fighting. For now, but I can feel myself losing ground. Another week, maybe 2, and I won't be able to tell the difference between waking and dreaming. I'll walk into the cave one morning and never come back out, and the Park Service will file my resignation, and someone new will take over as Chief Ranger, and the cycle will continue." Eli met her eyes. "I'm telling you this because I don't want that someone to be you, because you're young and brilliant, and you have your whole life ahead of you, and you deserve better than to become a ghost in limestone, singing forever in the dark." Jordan was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "I'll think about what you've said. I'll pay attention to any warning signs, but I'm not requesting a transfer based on ghost stories, even if you believe them. I came here to study the cave system, and that's what I'm going to do. At least promise me you'll never go into the restricted passages alone. And if you start having dreams about exploring, if you start hearing your name called from the darkness, if you find cave mud in places it shouldn't be, come find me immediately. Don't ignore the signs. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. That's how everyone else lost their battle." "I promise." But Eli could see she didn't fully believe him. Not yet. She would eventually when she experienced it herself, but by then, it might be too late. He was running out of time to protect people, running out of time to stand guard, running out of time to resist. The end came on a Thursday. Eli woke up in his bedroom, or thought he did, but when he looked around, the walls were limestone. His bed was a ledge of rock. His window opened onto an underground passage where water dripped in steady rhythm, marking time in geological increments that made human hours meaningless. He stood, confused. This was a dream. Had to be a dream, except he felt completely awake, alert, clear-headed in a way he hadn't been in months. "It's not a dream," Bishop said from the doorway that hadn't been there a moment ago. Or rather, everything before this was the dream. This is waking. This is real. This is home. Eli looked down at his hands. They were solid, real, but somehow more real than they'd been before. He could see the individual whorls of his fingerprints, could feel the texture of the air against his skin, could hear his heartbeat echoing off the stone walls. "No, I'm in my apartment. I'm in my bed. I'm still in the waking world." "Are you? When's the last time you remember being there? Truly remember, not just assumed you must have been there because where else would you be?" Eli tried to think back. He remembered his office, remembered warning Jordan, remembered standing in the cemetery talking to Bishop. But after that, nothing clear, just fragments, impressions, the feeling of time passing without actual memory of it passing. "How long have I been down here?" 3 days. You walked into the cave on Monday morning, said you needed to do inventory in the restricted passages, and you just kept walking, kept exploring, kept going deeper. Your body is down here, Eli. Has been for 3 days. This isn't possession or supernatural takeover. You made the choice. You walked in. You stayed. And now you're waking up to the reality of what you chose. The passage stretched ahead of him, lit by a light that came from no source, revealing wonders he'd never seen while supposedly awake. Formations that grew like frozen waterfalls. Pools that reflected images of the surface world. Passages that sang when the wind blew through them. And people, so many people. All the rangers who'd vanished, all the tourists who'd gone missing, all the guides who'd served the cave over the centuries. They moved through the passages with purpose and joy, exploring, discovering, existing in a state that transcended simple life or death. His grandfather stood among them, looking younger than Eli remembered, vital and healthy in a way he'd never been during his final years of cancer. He smiled when he saw Eli, opened his arms. "There you are. We've been waiting." Eli went to him, found himself embraced, felt tears streaming down his face, though he couldn't say if they were tears of grief or relief or both. "I tried to resist," Eli said. "I tried to protect people. I tried to stand guard as long as I could. I know. You did beautifully. You gave Jordan the warning she needed. You documented everything for the next person who notices. You fought longer than most. But Eli, you were always going to end up here. This is where our family belongs. This is where we've always belonged." His grandfather released him, and Eli saw the others gathering. Bishop, Amanda, her face radiant with joy. Victoria, looking younger and more at peace than she ever had as Chief Ranger. And dozens more, centuries worth of guides and explorers, and people who'd loved the darkness more than the light. "Welcome home," Bishop said. "Now let us show you what you've been missing. Let us show you the chambers we've discovered, the passages we've opened, the wonders that only we can see. You have forever to explore, Eli. Forever to discover. Forever to understand why we could never leave." They led him deeper into the cave, and with each step, Eli felt the weight of responsibility lifting, the constant vigilance, the fear, the resistance. All of it fell away, leaving only wonder and curiosity and the pure joy of exploration. He passed a limestone wall and noticed fresh signatures carved there, names and dates of people who'd arrived recently, and among them, in handwriting he recognized as his own, Eli Patterson, Chief Ranger, November 2026. Finally home. He didn't remember carving it, but it was true nonetheless. Jordan Pierce found the note on Thursday morning. She'd arrived for her shift to find the Chief Ranger's office empty. His badge on the desk, his uniform folded neatly on his chair. The note was underneath, written in Eli's precise handwriting. "Jordan, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I tried to warn you, I tried to protect you, but I couldn't protect myself. The calling became too strong, and I answered. I'm in the cave now. I'm part of it now, and I'm happier than I've been in years, even though I know you won't believe that. You'll be offered my position. Interim Chief Ranger while they search for a permanent replacement. Don't take it. Request a transfer immediately. Go to any park that doesn't have caves. Get as far from Mammoth Cave as you possibly can, because if you stay, you'll start noticing things, hearing things, feeling things, and once you notice, you can't unnotice. Once you hear, you can't unhear. Once you feel the pull, it's only a matter of time. I've left all my documentation in the locked cabinet behind my desk. The combination is your birthday. You mentioned it during orientation, and I remembered because that's what this thing does. It pays attention, it remembers, it uses everything it learns to pull you closer. Show the documentation to whoever they assign as the next Chief Ranger. Maybe they'll believe it, probably they won't, but at least you'll have tried. Take care of yourself, Jordan. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're stronger than this. No one is. And if you start hearing your name called from the passages, if you start dreaming about chambers that don't exist on any map, if you find yourself standing at the cave entrance with no memory of walking there, run! Don't think about it. Don't try to understand it. Just run and don't look back. The cave is beautiful. The cave is seductive. The cave is patient. And the cave always wins. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. I'm sorry I'm leaving you alone to face this, but I'm not sorry I'm here. I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. Good luck, Jordan. You're going to need it. Eli Patterson. Jordan read the note 3 times, her hands shaking. Then she looked out the window toward the cave entrance visible through the trees. It was a beautiful morning. Sun shining. Birds singing. Tourists already gathering for the first tours of the day. And from somewhere deep underground, so faint she almost didn't hear it, came the sound of voices singing. Old spirituals, work songs. And beneath them, a newer voice, one she recognized from just yesterday, joining in the eternal chorus. Eli was down there. She knew it with absolute certainty. Down in the darkness, exploring, discovering, becoming part of something vast and old and hungry. She should leave, should request that transfer, should run as far and as fast as possible from this place and its seductive darkness. But as she stood there with the note in her hands and the singing in her ears, Jordan realized something that chilled her to the core. She didn't want to leave. The thought of transferring out, of never seeing the cave again, of abandoning the research she'd dreamed about for years, it felt wrong. It felt like betrayal. The calling had already started. She just hadn't recognized it until now. Jordan folded the note carefully, placed it in her pocket, and walked to the window. She stood there for a long time, watching the cave entrance, listening to the singing that only she could hear, feeling the pull of the darkness like a rope around her heart. "Not yet," she whispered. "I'm not ready yet." But even as she said it, she knew the truth. It wasn't about being ready, it was about being chosen, and the cave had already made its choice. It was only a matter of time. The park superintendent found a replacement chief ranger within a week, a career park service employee named Robert Nash, 53 years old, 25 years of experience at various parks. Impeccable record. He seemed like the perfect choice. Jordan briefed him on standard operations, showed him the documentation Eli had left behind, warned him about the incidents that had been happening for decades. Nash listened politely, made appropriate sympathetic noises, and then quietly filed all of Eli's research under personal theories not supported by evidence. "I appreciate your concern," he told Jordan, "but I've worked at a dozen parks and every single one has ghost stories. Superstitious visitors seeing things in the dark, rangers playing pranks on each other, the power of suggestion creating shared delusions. It's normal, it's even part of the charm, but it's not something we need to treat as a serious operational issue." Eli didn't file fake resignation papers. He didn't move away. He disappeared into that cave and he's still in there. Eli Patterson had a documented history of mental health struggles, insomnia, paranoid ideation, obsessive documentation of trivial incidents. He was clearly suffering from some kind of breakdown, and rather than seeking help, he chose to disappear. It's tragic, but it's not supernatural. Have you read the historical reports? The pattern going back to the 1970s? I've read them. They show a pattern of suggestibility, of one person's paranoia spreading to others, of institutional failure to provide proper mental health support to rangers working in isolated, stressful conditions. What they don't show is any evidence of supernatural phenomena. Nash smiled, kind but condescending. You're young, you're new, you got caught up in a colleague's delusions, but you're going to be fine. Just focus on the work, ignore the ghost stories, and remember that caves are geology, not magic. Jordan knew there was no point arguing. Nash would learn the truth the same way everyone else did, through direct experience. The only question was how long it would take and whether he'd resist or surrender when the calling began. She returned to her duties, led tours, answered tourist questions, tried to focus on the geology and history rather than the impossible things she was starting to notice. The whispers in empty passages, the shadows that moved wrong, the dreams that felt more real than waking, and the singing, always the singing, rising from the depths, calling her home. 3 months later, on a cold February morning, Jordan didn't show up for work. Her apartment was found empty, door unlocked, her ranger uniform folded neatly on the bed, her badge placed on top. On her bathroom mirror, written in what looked like cave mud, "Finally understand. Finally home. Finally free." Robert Nash filed the resignation paperwork without comment. Another ranger having a breakdown, another young person unable to handle the isolation and stress of park service life. Tragic, but not uncommon. He'd seen it before at other parks. He'd probably see it again. But that night, lying in his park housing apartment, Nash heard something that made him sit up in bed. Singing, faint but unmistakable, rising from somewhere beneath his floor, beneath the earth, beneath everything, old spirituals, work songs, and beneath them, newer voices, female voices, male voices, dozens of voices, all singing together in the darkness. Nash got out of bed, walked to his window, looked toward the cave entrance barely visible in the moonlight, and standing at the entrance, silhouetted against the darkness, he saw figures, tall and short, old and young, dressed in clothing from different eras, all of them watching his window, all of them waiting. He closed his blinds, climbed back into bed, pulled the covers over his head like a child hiding from monsters. But he could still hear the singing, could still feel them watching, could still sense the pull of the darkness like gravity, inevitable and patient and impossible to resist forever. "It's not real," he whispered to himself. "It's just my imagination. Just the power of suggestion. Just..." But he stopped mid-sentence because he realized he was lying. He'd felt it the moment he arrived at Mammoth Cave. He'd just been too proud to admit it. The pull, the calling, the sense that something vast and ancient and hungry was watching him from the depths, waiting for him to acknowledge its existence, waiting for him to stop pretending ignorance, waiting for him to come home to a place he'd never been, but had somehow always belonged. Nash got out of bed, walked to his desk, pulled out a notebook and pen. He began to document his experience, just as the rangers before him had done. The sounds he'd heard, the figures he'd seen, the pull he felt toward the cave entrance even now in the dead of night, when every rational instinct told him to stay inside, stay safe, stay in the light. He documented everything. But unlike the rangers before him, he had no one left to warn. Eli was gone. Jordan was gone. Victoria and Amanda and dozens of others were gone. He was alone in his knowledge, alone in his resistance, alone in his inevitably losing battle against something that had been calling people into the darkness for thousands of years. The singing continued through the night, and Robert Nash sat at his desk, writing and writing and writing, documenting the end of his resistance even as it was happening, leaving a record for whoever came next, knowing that whoever came next would face the same choice, the same calling, the same inevitable surrender. Because the cave was patient, the cave was hungry, the cave was home, and eventually everyone came home. So remember, Help us hit 1,000 subscribers by the new year. New terrifying stories daily. Mammoth Cave is real. It's in Kentucky, and you can visit it today. Stephen Bishop was real, an enslaved guide who became one of history's greatest cave explorers, who died mysteriously in 1857 at age 37, who's buried in the old guide's cemetery overlooking the passages he discovered. Floyd Collins was real. He was trapped in Sand Cave for 17 days in 1925, and the nation listened in horror as he slowly starved and froze to death in the darkness. The tuberculosis hospital was real. Dr. Krogan really did send patients into the cave, believing the air would cure them, and many of them died there in the absolute dark. These are historical facts. These are documented truths. But there are other truths that aren't documented, other stories that aren't told, other rangers who've disappeared over the decades, whose names appear on resignation papers, but whose voices can still be heard singing in the passages, whose signatures appear on cave walls dated after their supposed departures, whose bodies were never found because they never left. The question isn't whether the cave calls to people, the question is whether you'll answer when it calls to you. So, if you ever visit Mammoth Cave, if you take a tour into those beautiful ancient passages, if you stand at Echo River and look into water so black it seems bottomless, listen carefully. You might hear singing. You might hear your name. You might feel something pulling at you, inviting you deeper, promising you wonders beyond description if you'll just take one more step into the darkness. And if that happens, remember Eli Patterson, remember Jordan Pierce, remember every ranger who tried to resist and failed. Remember that the cave is patient, the cave is hungry, and the cave always, always wins. Don't answer. No matter how beautiful the singing, no matter how much it feels like coming home, no matter how many voices you recognize calling your name from the depths. Don't answer. Because if you do, you'll join them in the darkness. You'll become part of the cave's memory, part of its consciousness, part of its eternal chorus. You'll explore forever and discover forever and guide forever, happy and free and trapped all at once. You'll be home, finally, eternally, irreversibly home. Until tomorrow night, stay scared, and whatever you do, stay in the light. The darkness is always hungry, and it's always waiting. They reached a junction point where dozens of neural pathways converged. Voronov could see bioelectrical impulses running along them, carrying information. This was important. This was vital to the ship's function. The figure began placing explosives. The devices were unlike anything in Imperial arsenals, cylindrical, covered in digital readouts and strange markings. The figure worked quickly, placing charges at key neural junctions. "Margos," Voronov said, "do you have anything that can help?" Calyx was already moving. "The Valkyrie still has 4 missiles in its launch tubes. I can repurpose them as demolition charges. Do it. Fast." They worked frantically. Calyx's mechadendrites moved with inhuman speed, reprogramming missile guidance systems into simple timers. Voronov placed charges at what looked like major blood vessels, at neural nodes, at anything that seemed structurally important. The antibody organisms kept coming. The figure held them off, its weapons never stopping. Shotgun blasts echoed through the fleshy corridors. The chainsaw's roar was constant. "Charges placed," Calyx reported. "Timers set for simultaneous detonation in 3 minutes." The figure looked at them, then looked back the way they'd come. It started running. They ran. Through passages that were actively trying to close around them. Through chambers where half-formed tyrannids reached out with unfinished claws. Through corridors that seemed to scream as the bioship's immune system went into overdrive. Behind them, they could hear something, a sound like a whale singing, but wrong, alien. The hive mind knew what they'd done. It was trying to stop them. Walls of flesh grew across their path. The figure didn't slow. It crashed through them with brute force, chainsaw carving a path. They reached the crash site. The Valkyrie was still there, more damaged than before, but potentially functional. "Can this thing even fly?" Kovar asked. The figure was already in the pilot's seat. The engines coughed, sputtered, died. The figure tried again. The engines caught. Barely. The Valkyrie lifted off the ground, wobbling dangerously. They shot toward the hangar opening. Behind them, the bioship's interior was going haywire. The walls were convulsing. The antibody organisms were swarming toward them. They cleared the hangar just as the charges detonated. The explosion was catastrophic. Every charge, every repurposed missile, every piece of explosive they'd placed detonated simultaneously at key points throughout the bioship's nervous system. The shockwave hit the Valkyrie and threw it forward like a toy. Voronov was slammed against his harness hard enough to break ribs. His vision went dark. He couldn't breathe. When his vision cleared, they were falling. The Valkyrie's engines were dead. They were in a barely controlled descent, the ground rushing up to meet them. The figure fought with the controls, coaxed the dying aircraft into something resembling a glide. They hit the ground hard, skidding across the ruins of what had once been a residential district. The Valkyrie's hull screamed as it tore through rubble. They came to a stop against a collapsed hab block. Voronov forced open the side hatch and fell out onto Rockcrete. He lay there for a moment, staring at the sky. The bioship was dying. It writhed in the upper atmosphere like a dying whale. Neural control severed. Its body was shutting down. Atmosphere vented from massive ruptures in its hull. Partially formed organisms were expelled into the void, freezing instantly. The ship began breaking apart, 8-kilometer chunks of bioengineered flesh falling toward the planet. One massive piece fell nearby, impacting with enough force to register on seismographs across the continent. "We did it," Koval whispered. She was lying next to Voronov, staring at the same sky. "Emperor's mercy, we actually did it." On the ground, the remaining Tyranid organisms were going feral. Without synapse control, without the Hive Fleet's coordination, they lost all semblance of order. Hormagaunts attacked termagants. Warriors turned on smaller organisms. The swarm was consuming itself. Across the planet, Imperial forces saw their chance. Tanks emerged from hiding. PDF soldiers came out of bunkers. The counteroffensive began. Voronov forced himself to sit up. Every movement was agony. He looked for the figure. It had climbed out of the Valkyrie and was standing on top of the wreckage, looking at the chaos, at the dying bioship, at the feral Tyranids tearing each other apart. Then it started walking, not toward safety, toward the nearest concentration of feral organisms. "It's still fighting," Volkov said. "We won. The planet's saved, and that thing is still fighting." Voronov watched the figure disappear into the ruins. He could still hear it, the roar of its shotgun, the scream of its chainsaw. "It's not fighting for us," Voronov said quietly. "It never was. It's fighting because that's what it does. That's all it does." 5 days later, Inquisitor Gregor Valdane arrived with a full Ordo Xenos investigation fleet. Valinor's rest had been secured. The feral Tyranids had been hunted down and exterminated. The orbital debris from the destroyed bioship had been catalogued. The surviving population was being evacuated. 7 million dead. 3 major cities reduced to biomass. Entire continents scarred by digestion pools. But the Tyranid threat had been eliminated. Voronov stood before Valdane in what remained of the planetary command center. The Inquisitor was a tall man, his face scarred from decades of fighting Xenos threats. His eyes were the cold grey of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. "Tell me everything," Valdane said. Voronov did. He started with the portal and ended with the bioship's destruction. He left nothing out. Every detail, every kill, every impossible thing the warrior had done. Valdane listened without interruption. When Voronov finished, the Inquisitor was silent for a long moment. "This warrior," Valdane said finally. "You never learned its identity, never saw its face." "No, sir. It never spoke, never removed its helmet. It allowed us to follow, but it never acknowledged us as allies." "And the portal?" "Still active, deep in the mining tunnels." Valdane nodded slowly. "Show me." They descended into the tunnels, past collapsed sections, past dried ichor and scorch marks, past places where the rock had been melted by weapons that shouldn't exist. The cavern was exactly as Voronov remembered, and the portal was still there. still pulsing with that crimson and emerald energy that hurt to look at. Valdane approached it carefully. He pulled out scanning equipment, ran every test in the inquisitorial arsenal. Finally, he lowered his instruments. "I've been an Inquisitor for 43 years, Valdane said quietly. "I've seen Necron phase technology, Eldar webway gates, chaos rifts that lead to places that shouldn't exist. This is none of those things. This is something else entirely." "Sir, the warrior—" "I know," Valdane interrupted. "It's returning." Voronov heard it before he saw it. The heavy footsteps, the clink of weapons against armor. The figure emerged from the tunnel entrance. It was covered in fresh ichor. Its armor was more damaged than before, deep gouges showing where even that miraculous material had been tested. But it was walking steadily, weapons secured. Voronov stepped forward. He had to know. One more time. One last chance. "Who are you?" he asked. "Please, where did you come from? Why did you help us?" The figure stopped, turned to face him fully. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the figure reached to its armor and detached something, a spent shotgun shell, larger than any Imperial weapon would use. It was warm to the touch, marked with symbols that Voronov didn't recognize. Writing, perhaps, or identification codes from a civilization that had never existed in Imperial records. The figure held it out. Voronov took it. His hand was shaking. "Thank you," Voronov said, "for everything. You saved us. You saved millions of people who will never know your name. Thank you." The figure tilted its head slightly, then it nodded once. Through the reflective visor, Voronov thought he saw something, not a face, not even eyes, but an idea, a concept, fury given physical form, rage distilled into matter and energy, violence as a philosophy, as the fundamental state of being. This wasn't a person who fought monsters. This was something that existed to kill monsters. That's all there was. No mercy. No doubt, no hesitation. Just endless, absolute violence directed at anything that preyed on the innocent. The figure turned and walked toward the portal. As it approached, the energy intensified. Voronov could hear those distant sounds again. The grinding music, the roar of weapons, the fury that never ended. The figure stepped through. The portal pulsed once, brighter than before. Then it collapsed with a sound like reality tearing. The energy dissipated, leaving only scorch marks and the lingering smell of ozone and gunpowder. "Well," Valdane said after a long moment, "that was enlightening." The debriefing took 6 weeks. Inquisitorial telepaths combed through Voronov's memories, verifying every detail. Magos Kalix's servo-skull recordings were examined frame by frame, analyzed by Mechanicus tech priests, who declared the footage both genuine and impossible. Every witness was interviewed. Every piece of physical evidence was catalogued. The scorch marks where the portal had been. The crater where the Hive Tyrant had died. The wreckage of the bioship, still being processed by Mechanicus salvage teams. The official report stated that Valinor's rest had been saved by exceptional valor from the planetary defense forces, combined with a catastrophic malfunction in the Tyranid Hive Fleet's coordination systems. A full company of Space Marines was credited with destroying the bioship, even though no Space Marines had been within 100 light years. The truth was classified at the highest levels of Imperial secrecy. Most of the witnesses were mind-wiped. Some were reassigned to distant sectors where they'd never encounter each other again. A few simply disappeared, their service records erased. But Voronov convinced Valdane to spare him. "Someone needs to remember," Voronov argued. "Someone needs to know what really happened. If it comes back, if another portal opens, someone needs to understand what we're dealing with." Valdane considered this for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "You'll be assigned to a monitoring station," Valdane said, "built directly over the former portal location. Your orders are simple. Watch for any signs of another breach, and if you see one, contact me immediately." 3 months later, Voronov sat at his desk in the monitoring station. It was quiet. Too quiet. The sensors hummed. The screens showed nothing but baseline readings. He kept the spent shotgun shell on his desk. No Magos in the Mechanicus could identify the symbols. No database in the Imperium contained any reference to technology like that. It was a mystery. an impossibility. But it was real. Voronov picked up the shell, feeling its weight. Somewhere beyond the barriers of reality, beyond the warp and the materium and everything the Imperium understood, there was a warrior. Not a space marine, not an Imperial champion. Something else. Something that existed solely to kill monsters. And the terrifying part wasn't that such a being existed. The terrifying part was that it was necessary. That somewhere in the infinite universe, things existed that were so terrible, so consuming, so absolutely destructive that they required an equal and opposite force. A force of pure violence, pure rage, pure distilled fury. Voronov set the shell back on his desk and returned to his monitoring duties. If the Tyranids ever came back to Valana's Rest, if the shadow in the warp descended again, he knew what might save them. He also knew that what saved them was more terrifying than what it saved them from. But as he sat in the quiet monitoring station, listening to the sensors and watching the screens, Voronov found himself hoping something. He hoped that Warrior was still out there, still fighting. Because if beings like that existed, if there were forces in the universe dedicated to destroying monsters with that level of commitment, then maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. Even if those forces were more frightening than the darkness itself. Even if Salvation wore green armor and carried weapons that defied explanation. Even if the thing that saved you was just as likely to kill you if you got in its way. Because in a universe full of horrors, sometimes the only thing that can save you is an even greater horror pointed in the right direction. Voronov picked up the shell one more time, turned it over in his hands, felt the weight of it. Somewhere, in some other reality, that warrior was still fighting, still killing, still existing as pure, focused violence. And Voronov was grateful for it. This case file is now closed, but countless others await investigation. If you want more nightmare scenarios, impossible battles and encounters that defy explanation, subscribe and hit that notification bell. The multiverse is infinite and the horrors within it never sleep. Until next time, stay vigilant.